Welcome to Agree to Disagree, the podcast where two sisters show how you can disagree about everything but still keep that family bond and friendship.
That's right. We're Sharon and Karen, and we don't just see the world differently, we live it differently. Grab a coffee, settle in, and enjoy the conversation. Who knows? You might even find yourself changing sides. Just give me a hard time. Hi, I'm Sharon from Texas.
Oh my God. Hi, I'm Karen from Morocco. I can't.
To those of us who listen to our podcast,
it's just you and
had
me.
to have seen, I know. You had to have seen that on video to really get our laughter.
We'll get to video at some stage. We promise.
At some stage, maybe. Let's not promise.
No, let's promise. We gotta get to
I don't
video.
want to promise. I'm not putting a promise out there. I disagree with you on that promise.
That's another show.
That's another show. So we're going to talk about DEI today and programs and Trump's executive order to discontinue them in not only federal agencies and organizations, but also deny federal funding to organizations if they don't get rid of their DEI program.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Where you stand on this, Karen?
Well, I don't know why you would want to get rid of something that promotes fair treatment and equality and diversity. It doesn't force it. It doesn't set quotas, but it's just to promote it. Why wouldn't we want initiatives in organizations and in the federal government that supports diversity and equity and equality and inclusion? Why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing. I agree with you.
Huh, well,
So
okay.
you're talking
That's where this.
No. Let's talk about, because if you think about some of our previous conversations, here is government again getting involved with corporations' business.
Well, I don't think that government.
Of course, it probably goes back to EEO, right? Equal Employee Act and opportunity and that type of stuff.
Kind of.
I mean, that's probably why the government is involved.
Yeah, I mean, I looked and it said back as early as the Civil War in 1865 or 1876, an amendment was to give preference to veterans because they had too many veterans and they didn't have anything to do with them. And so that's kind of where DEI efforts started. And then Roosevelt in 36 mandated the federal government to give preference to purchase products made by blind people. And then they expanded that to disabled people. And then Kennedy said he wanted to put affirmative action in place.
Affirmative. We need to make that a topic.
But affirmative action, it's the same. It's the same thing. Affirmative action to ensure. If you look at the description of it, it was to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin.
Yeah. So back to the DEI thing. I don't think there's any harm in having DEI programs. I have actually taught DEI programs in corporations.
Well, yeah, so DEI also includes fair treatment for women as well. It's not
Absolutely it does. It's not just about race. It's not just about sexual orientation. It is also about women. I remember one time I had to stop wearing high heels because of my neck issues. And I remember crying about it because you know me, I was all about the high heels. But I remember somebody saying one time to me at work, well, what's the big deal? Just wear flats. Like, what's the big deal? And it was a man saying it to me. And I said, you have absolutely no idea how much more power I have when I am eye level with a man in the workplace. Like that physicality makes a difference. That physicality
yes and no.
makes a difference.
I think you're overlooking the fact that there's a sexuality component to it as well. That the more physically attractive you are, then the more power you have as well.
I'm not overlooking that. Oh, I'm not overlooking that either.
Because then you're saying short girls have no power.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm just saying that did give me a leg up.
It did. It did.
The high heels gave me not
a leg up. Literally a leg up.
A leg up. Yeah, literally a leg up, a heel up. But I will say that I don't think until probably the last 10 years, I don't think the DEI curriculum actually was good until the last 10 years. I think the DEI curriculum actually got better with a focus on DEI. It actually got better. Now, and the reason I say that is because in the last 10 years, that's when they included, and it may have been 15 for unbiased consciousness, or what is that term? So implicit bias or unconscious bias refers to subconscious attitudes and assumptions. These biases can impact how individuals feel and think about others, and they are often based on race, gender, ethnicity, ability, age, and other factors. So when they introduced that whole piece of education and curriculum into DEI programs, it made a world of difference because we were educating people about the fact that you don't even know you have this. So let's talk to you about that unconscious bias and let's educate you on how to identify it in your own language, in your own interactions with others, that kind of stuff. That made a huge difference. The other thing that was added probably, I want to say maybe 7 years ago into, or maybe even 5 years ago into the DEI curriculum was educating people on equity. It's not just about access, but it's about equity. And I think also was something that really made a huge dent in getting people to think about not only their unconscious bias, but also just how equitable is something if we don't assist and accommodate those that need, and I'm just going to say it because I said it earlier and I think it's kind of a leg up. So do I think that these programs did any good before the last 15 years? Absolutely not. Didn't do a lick of good. Well,
I don't think that you can say that because they were, like you said, a lot of these programs stemmed from making sure that people that didn't have the same advantages initially, DEI did a lot for getting more women in the workforce as well. It did a lot for getting minorities.
How can you prove that DEI did that? DEI education programs in corporations did that. That's just because of the law. That's the Equal Opportunity. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Act that did that. It's not the DEI programs.
Maybe. Show me where DEI has hurt anyone. DEI programs has hurt anyone.
I said I agree with you. It's not hurting, but it's also, I don't think until the last 15 years when these two components came into the DEI, fine. They didn't do anything.
But explain to me from a conservative point of view, I need you to explain to me why
I don't think they heard
the conservatives hate DEI.
They don't hate DEI. What they hate is that it was shoved down our throats for the last 4 years, and that's why Trump's doing what he's doing. That goes back to
DEI has been around for more than 4 years. So what has been shoved down? In what way? In what way was DEI shoved down someone's throat? I'm honestly asking. I don't know why all of a sudden this has been this issue for the right.
Okay, then it goes back to the media. It goes back to the media because that's all you heard for the last 4 years. That's all we heard about, that and transgender and DEI and that's all we heard.
DEI, just take the transgender out of it. But DEI, why would it bother someone to hear that DEI is being implemented? That DEI programs are being implemented?
No, DEI has been around for a very long time.
Right. So why is it all of a sudden a problem? You're telling me it was shoved down people's throats. What about it was shoved
just
down
because
people's throats?
That's all you heard. Well, because then the feds made it in the last 4 years. Then they said you can't just have diversity and inclusion, which is what it was. It was just diversity and inclusion.
No,
so now you have to add the E. No, then you had to add the E in. So then
diversity it's not diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Equality. But equality was never, it was always D&I. It was always D&I programs or I&D programs, always. And then the last 4 years, all of a sudden, no, you have to throw equality in there. You have to throw equality in there. And we're like, well, the equal employment opportunity. Because the equal employment.
Okay, it wasn't working. Otherwise, we wouldn't have needed the equality part. Women are still not being paid the equivalent of men.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole conversation.
Okay, well, this is part of DEI. This is part of equity and equality.
Okay, if you look at that then, what did I say? I said it's been around for how many years? Like 20,
that doesn't mean that you.
years,
that doesn't mean that you
wasn't
do away
doing
with
anything.
it. But things were better.
But it's not changing.
But things were better. You can't say
it's
that things were not better because there are more women in the workforce. Wages for women have gone up, and at least you
correlate that directly to DEI programs.
You can't say that it's not. And again, show me where it's hurt anything.
So
if we need to get rid of something, I would assume that it's because it's hurting us in some way. I don't see how DEI is hurting anyone in any way. And now, how many hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their jobs because they worked on a DEI program or they're a minority? My God, he just fired the only female and black general out of like 6 generals, and now they're all white ones just because he considers them DEI, just because they're black and a woman? It doesn't make any sense.
You don't know. You have no idea about that.
I said that it doesn't make any sense. Well, they haven't told us that there was a valid reason for them to be fired. Do you think it's coincidental? You think it's coincidental that the only 2 generals that were fired happened to be the only woman and the only black man out of all the generals that he wanted to fire?
You're not going to sit there.
He said it was because of DEI, that he's getting rid of DEI, and that's why he let them go.
So maybe they were only hired because of DEI in the last 4 years, and they actually don't meet any kind of merit qualifications.
Okay, so let's talk about merit qualifications. What qualifications does Hegseth have to be Secretary of Defense? Let's talk about qualifications. What qualifications?
No, that's not what we're talking about right now.
Well, if you say that DEI overlooks qualified candidates and then you pull these people out.
I'm saying that about your example. How do you know? You don't know?
Because he said they were hired.
Do you know shit that he says that's not true?
Yes, I do. Almost everything out of his mouth is not true.
No,
but
not
everyone
everything. Not everything.
But then I have a conservative telling me, well, you have to know. So I have to be a mind reader to know what I need to believe from Trump and what I need to not believe from Trump.
Just like any politician, like Biden as well.
Biden at least doesn't lie about minute details.
Oh, that's bull crap. That's bull crap.
Anyway, we're not talking about Biden. Biden is gone. Biden is not the issue. We are talking about DEI.
So that's why we should have done this podcast when he was in office.
Well, don't worry. Trump is going to blow things up enough that a Democrat's going to be back soon enough, and then we can still continue with our podcast.
Oh, you think? Yeah.
He says, I want DEI programs gone, and he says, I'm cutting funding, and he's telling Doge to go in and fire anyone associated with DEI.
But that doesn't, just because he says something doesn't mean it's going to happen.
It's happening. It's happening. Okay. I see a lot of posts come across, and I don't know if these are valid or not, but I see a lot of things come across where Trump supporters are saying, well, I wasn't a DEI hire, but yet I got laid off from my job. I thought you were only going after DEI hires. I thought you were only going after government waste. And so it seems like they're living in this like fantasy world of, I don't like 80% of what he says, so I'm only going to believe the 20% of what he says. It's like, listen to what he's saying. He is saying exactly what he's going to do.
We don't really listen to a lot of what he says. So I think we got off on the tangent because we were talking about whether DEI or the Equal Employment Opportunity Act is what has made a difference for women. Saying, I think it's the act that made a difference for women. And you said, but it hasn't. And don't you think that DEI programs I think it's
very difficult to pinpoint what has helped and what has not helped. But DEI in and of itself, I don't see how it's a bad thing.
I don't think there's any harm. I don't think
there's
any
no harm.
Absolutely don't think there's any harm. But I do think that we focus on making changes more in the Equal Employment Opportunity Act rather than focusing on DEI as going to be the solve-all. That's not the solve-all. I've taught these classes. That's not going to solve anything. Now, is it good to still have them? And most companies, because remember, I was a consultant for 17 years, so not only did my 2 companies mandate it every year, but companies that I was consulting with mandated it, right? I mean, it was mandated. The company I currently work for said they will not get rid of their program.
Right. But they obviously don't get federal funding. Well, because the administration has said that if you get federal funding and you don't get rid of your programs,
so
I'm going to
put this thought out there. Let's just see where this goes. By the time that executive order actually becomes a law, 4 years will have gone by and somebody's not going to be in term anymore.
Well, I don't know.
I'm just saying that's the way this country works, and that's the way our government works. It'll take that long for it to trickle down to anybody that's getting federal funding, and then it won't matter anymore, because then another executive order with the next president will come in and do away with it.
I think that's naive, because the way that he's treating these executive orders is he's going in with a bulldozer and implementing them. Every one of them. He's implementing.
There are still regulations and laws. And
not on this. This seems to be pretty straightforward.
I'm going to have to do some research on that, because I would guarantee that my company, which is a global company, has federal contracts because of the work that they do. And they are saying absolutely will not get rid of it. That was a quote from our
I don't
CEO.
know if Trump means federal funding as in grants or subsidies, or if he means contracts. Contracts are a little bit more difficult. Contracts you can't just stop.
Willy-nilly. Exactly.
But funding, and again, we need to see how a lot of this plays out, because he cuts funding, but the courts say, no, you can't cut funding, but then he still cuts funding.
Exactly.
So we'll see.
Well, or and in some cases he won't, because the courts rule, right? I mean, the courts rule.
Or the courts rule and they get ignored.
No. They can't be ignored. If it's a Supreme Court.
Well, there was a deadline Wednesday. I don't know what happened to the deadline Wednesday, because the administration had not abided by the judge's ruling that they needed to reinstate some of the international aid funding that they had cut. And there was a deadline Wednesday, and I didn't follow up with it to see if the administration adhered to that deadline.
Adhered to it. Yeah, they probably did.
But so what do you think about him going and firing anyone related to DEI? I mean, that is the mandate that he's put out there, that anyone in the federal government that works as part of a DEI program or initiative.
Well, if he's doing away, okay, that's a side effect of him saying we're doing away with DEI programs. So it's a side effect that all those people are going to be laid off.
Yeah.
It's not a firing. It's called a layoff.
Firing?
It's called a downsizing. It's called, because if you're going to say that, then you're going to say that I was fired when I was laid off. I don't have to put that on my next job application. I wasn't fired. I was laid off.
Okay. But
I'm just saying.
The terminology is one thing. It's still the same thing.
But that's the way you're seeing it.
No,
it's still the same thing.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the terminology. They're losing their jobs.
They're losing their job.
It's not like they're coming in and saying, we're going to replace this with a better program to make sure there's fairness. It seems like, this is just from the left perspective.
He's just making a statement.
No, it's more than that. It seems like, and it feels like, he's saying, we don't want anything hindering the white man's ability to reign supreme again.
No. What he's doing is he's making a statement saying, you constituents of mine, over the last 4 years have had this shoved down your throat. So I'm going to do some cost cutting. And that's the first thing that's going to go. That's what he's doing.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that's how you would look at it. Okay.
That's my opinion. And that you and I, and that's not how you're seeing it.
It's not how I'm seeing it.
We can disagree to disagree.
If he's not replacing it with something else or some better policies, if what they deem better policies or more inclusive policies, then how can it not then revert back to what it was, which was?
Well, we don't know if he's not. We don't know that he's not.
They haven't
this would be the
about
first step.
Introducing
this
anything.
Would be the first step.
Well,
I think because they haven't talked about it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it.
I think it's pretty irresponsible to just say, lose this and not have any plan in place to replace it. Or even say, they haven't even said that there's any plan to replace it.
It's making a statement, in my opinion. He's just making a statement and saying, I'm going to cut some cost. And this is one of those things I'm going to cut cost on that was shoved in y'all's faces for the last 4 years. So I'm gonna make some cost cuts here. I'm gonna make some cost cuts over here. I'm gonna make some cost cuts over here.
Is that where you want the cost savings to come from as a conservative? Do you want it to come from DEI programs?
Well, if you and I just talked about the fact that they don't harm anything, they don't hurt anybody, but they also don't do anything to change.
You don't know that. We said we don't know.
We don't know. There's no direct correlation. What we do know is that Equal Employment Opportunity Act changed things.
But
that's what
you don't know if it's had,
because it was a law. You
don't know if DEI has had a positive effect.
Well, but this was one thing that I thought about that I wanted to bring up about this. So like I said, I've taught DEI programs in companies, and I talked about at the very beginning.
Well, it's good that you're not still teaching it, or you'd be laid off.
Oh my gosh, I was already laid off during the Biden administration. So there you go.
That's why you secretly hate Biden.
and actually I was teaching DEI programs. No, that's not why. And I don't hate Biden.
I was just kidding.
I didn't like him as a president. Again, it's not about the person. What I will say, and this is true, and this is speaking from my psychology background and the way that I do know how people behave, and I've seen it. Even though I feel like the curriculum has improved in the last 10, 15 years in DEI programs, because it brought in the unconscious bias and it brought in the equality and equity piece. Even though the curriculum got better and got at the heart of the way people actually process and think through information, I have also seen that it absolutely does not change how people are treated.
I don't disagree with that. Just because we acknowledge that we have biases doesn't mean we're going to change our behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does it hurt or harm? Absolutely not. Does it help? Maybe 1 in every 5,000 people that go through a DEI program go ding, 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 and the light bulb goes off in their head and they watch what they say next time. You know what I'm saying? Now, does that make a difference if we can do 1 in every 5,000 across the world every year because we do these programs once a year? Maybe.
Well, I think that there were problems with DEI because I think that some of the flack came about if I remember correctly, some of the problems arose when universities were getting flack about quotas, trying to implement quotas for accepting students try to meet.
That's affirmative action. That happens.
Well, that's
the quotas for affirmative. I'm looking at DEI pretty narrowly. I will admit to you that. I'm looking at DEI as just the DEI programs. Affirmative action is a law. We need to make that a topic.
So it's April 27th, and we are doing an altered ending to our DEI episode. We're coming in and adding a little endpoint to it because we recorded this. We recorded this weeks ago, and Sharon pointed out to me that I had made an incorrect statement that Trump had fired the only black and female generals. And he actually had fired like 5 generals. And I think even after I said that, I think I had seen that, or right after the show, I had looked it up and seen that. Yeah. So we wanted to make that clarification. And
Can we also go back to all of the other podcasts and clarify when I've been wrong?
No, that would take way too much time.
Oh my gosh.
No, I try to edit out all of our glaring mistakes. I think one of them I edited out was the hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt that we were. And when I found out it's only like 37 trillion or something, because we had said, oh, it's hundreds of trillions. But yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
We don't want
37 trillion is a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's much different than hundreds of trillions. We don't want to make ourselves look too bad. I think it would have been interesting for us to wait a couple of weeks to do that DEI episode because there were a lot of things that happened in the week or two after that I would have liked to have talked about, which is removing things from the websites that pertain to African Americans or women that I think is not right as well. But the one point that I wanted to make also is none of us, I think, liked the fact that the Democratic Party felt like that they were shoving it down our throats that we must adhere to DEI, that everything must include DEI, right?
Yeah.
So you don't think it should be mandated?
Well, it can be mandated, but I think at the state level and at the corporate level, but it doesn't I don't think DEI programs and the education of DEI in corporate America and actually changes people that much.
Well, yeah, that's fine. So it shouldn't be mandated. Yeah. It shouldn't be forced onto people.
Yeah, because there's no correlation.
How is that different of them trying to force organizations and companies to have DEI programs? How is it different of them now trying to force organizations and companies to not have DEI programs?
Oh, it's not any different. It's not any different. No, I agree. Like, just stay out of it. Like I told you, like my company has already come out and said, we are not removing DEI.
Right.
Now, I did some research to see, okay, are they going to lose federal money because of that? Yes, they will, but it'll be through contracts. It's not federal. They're not getting federal funding, right? It's just federal contracts may be discontinued. Well, okay. All right. Well, they'll just go find another contract, right?
Yeah.
I
we did agree that the government should just stay out of it.
Yeah, just stay out of it.
And this will probably be another topic, but what did you think about Harvard standing up and saying no to all the requirements? Because it wasn't just DEI. They actually said no to other requirements that the administration wanted them to follow. Did you know that?
I knew that they said no to DEI. What were some of the other requirements that they said?
They wanted them to, if I remember correctly, they wanted them to also give them list of professors that take a pro-Palestinian stance and list
bullshit.
Of students that had protested.
That's BS.
Yeah.
That's BS.
And so I agree with Harvard standing up and saying no, but then that led to the question of why are we giving so much money to these universities like Columbia and Harvard and Princeton that have endowments and they don't need the money as much as other public universities that don't have those endowments. So
that's a whole other conversation. That could be a whole nother podcast. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you on that. There's so much federal money going to universities.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're able to wrap that up on DEI and make that clarification. So that's good. And now agree. DEI is dead and buried and we never have to talk about it again, right?
And we originally recorded that one probably like 2 months ago.
No, not 2 months ago.
It wasn't 6 weeks ago?
Maybe 6 weeks.
6 weeks ago.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah. Okay.
So that wraps up the DEI, and we'll get back to trying to be a little bit more accurate with our facts in the future.
Yes, we will.
All right. Till next time.
Bye, Karen.
Bye, Sharon.
That wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review. It helps us improve and get the word out.
Got thoughts, questions, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram or shoot us an email at agreetodisagree@gmail.com.
Let us know what you think, what topics you'd like us to cover, or any questions you might have. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.